Well, let's bring Kevin Faulconer on. He made the announcement today of his Streets to Shelter homeless plan for California.
Kevin, how are you?
Gentlemen, good to be back with you. Thank you.
Now, you actually reduced homelessness in San Diego, correct?
We did, by double digits.
Explain how you did this, because we're dealing with this clown show here in L.A., not to mention the clown show out of Sacramento. What did you do?
Well, what I thought was common sense, which is we provided a shelter network. I picked the locations as mayor, and I made a deal with the community. I said it's going to be cleaner and safer with this shelter than before it was there. And I felt so strongly about that I created a new division within the San Diego Police Department called the Neighborhood Policing Division, whose sole focus was on homelessness and quality of life. And I will tell you, I absolutely firmly believe, because it worked in San Diego, that I think everybody has a right to shelter. But when we provide it, you have an obligation to use it. And I enforced that obligation. I did not allow, I repeat, I did not allow tent encampments on the sidewalks. Why? Because we actually care about people. We care about you enough not to let you do heroin and meth and kill yourself in a public street or public park. It worked. And part of what today was all about, which is saying we have to take this statewide, because it's not about partisanship, Republican, Democrat. It's about leadership. And the governor completely ignores that we have this problem. So I've said enough's enough. You know, you can throw all the money of the world on this if you want, but if you don't have the political will to actually make a difference on the streets, it's not going to change.
So how did you enforce this anti-camping?
Yeah, a right to shelter, but an obligation to take it.
You got a guy who built a two-tent home on the sidewalk. What happens next?
Right, we would say you can't build this on the sidewalk. We have a place for you to go. We have one of the shelters. It's free of charge. You're going to get the help and the support you need, but you can't leave your tent up. You either have to take it down yourself and move, or we're going to take it for you.
And if he says no, then what?
Then we would take it for them. But we had it progressive. I mean, we had steps in the process, right? We'd give you a warning first. We'd come back and then we'd say, look, we're serious about this. You're going to get a citation if you don't do this. And so nobody ever got enforced who didn't turn down the actual taking a shelter bed. And that's why, to me, it was so important that we have this approach that says we're going to give you the help, but if you don't use it, you can't sit in front of somebody's house doing heroin and meth or their place of business blocking the sidewalk.
Did you end up arresting any people, and was there blowback from these activist groups we've been talking about?
Well, there was a lot of blowback at first, but guess what? When people saw the difference, when they saw the tents going away in San Diego and in our streets and our commercial districts, they saw people actually using the shelters because they knew we were serious, and people actually getting help and getting back on their feet. We had strong public support. And in fact, the neighborhood policing division that I told you that we started, that became the number one source of referrals to our shelters, more so than all the other groups and everybody else out there. So it worked.
Public's overwhelmingly for this. This is not a political issue. I was just at a meeting a few weeks ago in Venice. 100 people, most of them liberals on the west side. They all wanted something done desperately. They all couldn't stand Bonin's approach anymore. I mean, this is almost universal. That everybody. That's what I'm saying. Why do you think the homeless advocates end up stopping so much, so many good ideas? What is the power they have? What is the secret here?
Well, they're wrong, first and foremost. And for those folks that say, no, it's okay to allow somebody to kill themselves in a tent, I just say you're wrong. Sorry. Don't go past go. Right? Right.
I know. But everybody in L.A. in politics hides from these homeless advocates. They're scared of them. Why?
Well, because they don't have the political spine to do the right thing. I mean, look, I went through all of that as well as mayor, but I said, I'm tired of all of the excuses. I'm tired of the fighting between the county and the city. I said, these are my streets as mayor. We're actually going to clean them up. We're going to make a difference. And that's why I feel so strongly that we have to take this statewide, and I will be a governor that leads by example, that says we're actually going to get people off the street and stop and remove these tent encampments. It is entirely possible. The public supports it. And why? Because they realize you're going to actually help people. rather than let them die on our streets. And I'll tell you today, when we were out at the press conference here in Los Angeles, we had people walking by saying, "Thanks for doing this. We need the help. Thank you."
Yeah, I know.
Can you hang on,
all the normal
Kevin?
people. All right, hold on. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get more details. Kevin Faulconer is our guest, the former mayor of San Diego, candidate to replace Gavin Newsom as governor in the recall election, came to L.A. today to talk about his approach to homelessness. More coming up.
John and Ken, KFI. Deborah Mark has news.
We continue now talking to the former mayor of San Diego, Kevin Faulconer, who came to L.A. today to announce his plan for homelessness in the state of California, calling it Streets to Shelter. And as we've been talking about, establishing a right to shelter, but what comes with that is an obligation to use it. And he was just explaining to us in San Diego what they did to get people who were camping on the sidewalks off the sidewalks, saying, we've got a place for you to go. You've got to go. You can't stay here.
And when you say right to shelter, what constitutes shelter? Because in L.A., Garcetti decided it has to be a $700,000 apartment.
This idea of permanent housing, right?
Yeah, and look, I push back strongly against all those who say it has to be housing only. And in fact, we set up a series of sprung structures. These were large tents, and we had bunk beds and all of the wraparound services that would go in there. You would have obviously food, showers, and mental health, and because look, we want to job training, get you back into that apartment. But the point was, it's a clean, safe, sanitary environment. It's the exact opposite of what happens when you're out on the streets. And so for all of those folks that they worry about being politically correct, and I say no, it's not about that. We need to actually worry about caring about people and not giving up on them and getting them off the streets and actually intervening. And there's a lot of folks that say, "Oh, you can't intervene, you can't do that." BS. We did it in San Diego.
Let me ask you this, though, Kevin: is there a revolving door here? Where did these people end up? All right, so you put them in some sort of a makeshift tent structure, got them off the streets in some kind of shelter. But what happened months from there?
Well, exactly, and that's why the shelter, we call them the bridge shelters, because it's not your permanent spot. It's what do we need to do to get you back on feet, match you with whether voucher from HUD or if you're a veteran, VA, everybody you got to treat differently because they're all unique, right? But the fact of the matter is we said we're not going to allow you to set up encampments in San Diego anymore, and it worked. I'll give you 30 seconds. I was out. We were opening a place for formerly homeless veterans, and a guy walks up to me. He says, "Hey, you're the mayor." And I said, "Yeah." And he says, "I just wanted to say thank you." And I said, "I appreciate that. We were opening up this new apartment." And he said, "No," he said, "I want to say thank you for cleaning up the tents under the freeway." He said, "I used to be one of the people living in those tents. But because we intervened, because we said you can't stay here," he went to the veteran shelter that I had, got himself clean and sober. He's now a peer counselor. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about intervene and say we care about you enough not to let you die under a freeway overpass.
Yeah, the activists seem to believe, their philosophy is these people will come to terms in their own time with getting the help and getting the shelter they need. Until then, leave them alone. That seems to be their approach to this.
I fundamentally disagree with that. And look what that approach has gotten us, gentlemen. Look what's happening in the streets of Los Angeles, San Francisco, Sacramento.
They had their way. We gave their way a good long run. It's a huge failure, and that's why I say they should be cut out of the conversation here. They're wrong. Their plans are disastrous. I don't understand their motivation. I don't care anymore. They just have to be ignored. Let me ask you this, though. Newsom's idea so far, he continued his game show host routine and announced he's going to hand out $12 billion for the homeless issue.
Yeah.
And he takes a bow and he leaves. What's the money being spent on? Do you know? Because he just says $12 billion, but we've spent billions here in L.A., and it's mostly been wasted.
Well, they did those hotel room things.
Well, look, that's the point. And this governor is big on rhetoric and no action, right? And that's why I was very clear about this is now going to be how we operate as a state. We are going to actually put this in legislation. We are going to get rid of all of the excuses. And we're going to say this is now how we operate in California. And guess what? People support that. Democrats, Republicans, independents. It's about doing the right thing. And you can throw all the money at the world at this problem, just like Newsom's trying to do. If you don't have the political will to make a difference on the streets, it's not going to change.
Well, we've tried it that way, too. We threw billions at it here in L.A. County. Nothing worked. Just throwing the money doesn't work. Everybody else's ideas have been tried now for years, and look what's happened. They were wrong.
They are, and that's why it's time for a change.
All right, Kevin, thank you very much for coming on again. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
All right, it's KevinFaulconer.com, and his last name is spelled Faulconer. Of course, he's the former San Diego mayor and a candidate in the recall to replace Newsom.